All right, ready, set, engage, episode 18. Unless I screwed up and lost count, I wouldn't be surprised. I had to sort of scroll back through and look at stuff. I actually want to take and probably upload these to YouTube. That way they're easier to watch in a series. As usual, the views expressed here are mine and mine alone and do not reflect that of any organization that I'm affiliated with. Had a couple topics that I wanted to cover today. The first is near and dear to my heart. Of course, I put these in the description. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was post-deployment blues, what it is, why, and then is there some plausible countermeasures that we can take, both as probably as a society, but also as individuals, especially related to it. All right, Silver Sun in North Carolina. Outstanding, John. We were down in Rose Hill. It was incredible, a great experience, which also sort of why the post-deployment blues talk. Second, Democratic Party, there was actually a very interesting thing I heard related to B.F. Skinner's research in the 1950s and 60s, and that was operant conditioning, which has to do with reward versus punishment. And so I'll cover a little bit about what operant conditioning is, and then how, of course, we all right, Craig, it is Canadian. The third one was just a quote. There was a Jordan Peterson again did a podcast thing, a Q&A, and he's spent a number of days talking with Sam Harris. I really don't like Sam Harris. I feel like he's very super far left, and some of the stuff I do have, not shaved, but I do have a neck. Some of the stuff he says is a little bit concerning, just in general. Like, I find it really hard to listen to Sam Harris. But one of the things he said was, of course, that the right says we need hierarchy of competence as sort of this is what the conservatives stand for. And I disagree. We'll get to that. And then the last one is religion codified as values, and then sort of thoughts on how that plays out into current society and what exactly that means. According to me, of course, this is sort of the Socratic method. So I just sit here and talk a whole bunch and let you know my thoughts. And if you guys have thoughts, I'd love to hear those as well. So post-deployment blues. There's actually this thing. You can look it up. There's a lot of great resources if you do wind up deploying or going into a volunteer aspect. If you do wind up going to a disaster zone, helping out, volunteering and stuff, a lot of times there's actually this feeling when you depart from that mission, and it's known as a post-deployment blues, which is some apathy, sometimes depression. It manifests itself in a number of different ways, and so there are. So I'm going to talk about Team Rubicon. I do volunteer with them. They send out resources and stuff after you deploy to sort of say, hey, here's the warning signs to look for. Here's some activities that you could do. And so the question becomes, just from a neurological or a psychological perspective. Scott, this is the first one. I got to go slow on the first one, and then it speeds up, I promise. So from a neurological perspective, like why is it plausible to experience sort of a blues period after you come back from a deployment? So this is my rationalization, so it's not meant to be all-encompassing of post-deployment blues or explain everyone's case. But for me specifically, like when I'm there and I go on an op, I don't watch TV. I don't even read a lot of news. I'll sometimes peruse the Facebook, but it's really not that interesting. But what I will do is I will take the opportunity to meet the other people that are there. And so that includes not only the people on, basically you do strike teams. And so you have a team of 5 or 6 people, and those are the people that you work with each day in like cleaning out houses or whatever the mission is for that operation. And so you get to know them pretty well, but sometimes you get the opportunity to converse with the homeowners. So down in North Carolina, I was able to learn a little bit about both of the stories from the 2 homeowners that we worked on. One is like, he's been through a lot over the last 4 years. And so talking to him, and he was like, I don't got many friends, and I've got fur friends. And so he's got like 3 cats, and he had to sort of rescue them by boat after all the flooding happened. And it's just really powerful to learn a bit more about their story, about who they are, and just learn on sort of that intimate and really vulnerable level, you know, sort of what people believe, what they stand for, etc. But I also take the opportunity not just to meet the home owners or the other volunteers that we're interacting with out in the field, but very much when you go back to the base, when you're we call them FOBs, so forward operating base. When you go back there, you also have the downtime and opportunity to meet and interact with people. Sometimes there's a beer flag, and so beer flag up means that you're able to drink, but it's like 2 drink max, right? You're not there to get loaded. You're just there to socialize and interact, which is nice. But so I had the opportunity to sit down and learn stories of people from all over. Guy from Hawaii, excellent dude. Dude from LA, excellent dude. Mike from North Carolina, fantastic. And they all have different experiences, stories, belief systems. They all interact with the world differently, communicate differently. And it's like sort of this free flow of ideas. I mean, we sat one night, and I don't know if Arno watches, he's a great guy. We sat one night till like 11 o'clock, and we were being loud and a little bit obnoxious. You know, I was trying to express a point of, philosophically, we were talking about whether people can be good or evil. Like, is there that dichotomy of character? And my position is, well, I can't vouch for that one way or the other. I can never say this is a good person, this is an evil person. What I can say is that we're all capable of doing good and evil acts. And so it's just sort of a matter of temperament. There's a lot of gray area in there. So instead of saying you're a good person, like, you can be good people, which is just sort of that colloquialism of like, this is somebody that I would do business with, interact with. Like, I recommend them as sort of a person. That doesn't mean that everything they do is going to be something you agree with. So we were having that conversation, and basically I said, I can tell you, I believe that this is a trustworthy person, or I can say things like that. As long as it's my belief, my thought, my feelings, then I'm okay positing that. But when you say that's a good guy, and you're meaning it as a definitive, then it's really hard to say that because like, people are, one, capable of change, and everyone's sort of capable of good and evil as this premise of morality, or however you view it. And so it was a good philosophical conversation. Learned a lot about him, his family, where he's from, some of the stories from his daughter, who's been she's in the military now, serving, it's awesome. And so it's just a fantastic opportunity, right? So basically, you take these people, they volunteer, they're from all over the US. We even had one guy from Australia come together. You go down to a disaster, and you're there fighting for like common cause, common good, or general good, right? There isn't an us versus them. There's not this competition between anybody. It's just all sort of pro-social behavior, which is beautiful. If you want to read a book related to functioning of teams and how that sort of plays out, or what the expectations would be for people who are not competing with another, but instead are competing against a common cause, I think it's called Tribal Leadership. If you looked it up on Amazon, it would be there. But basically, like, when you talk about high functioning teams, the position of the book is that there's 5 levels of that. The bottom is just nihilism. Everything sucks. I hate everyone in the world. There's no meaning to anything. The second is like prison mentality of the world's against us, and we're this small group. The third level of the tribal hierarchy there is like me against other people. So it's the individual contributor, or you trying to stand up and be the outlier, the forward performer. Fourth is us versus them. So like your competition between, your Xbox and your PlayStation, or your Samsung TVs and your Sony and Panasonic TVs. You have sort of that leading edge competitor that you're going against. And then the final level of it, all right, bunch of Rubicon folks, great. And then the final level, the highest level of that tribal leadership, and that capability as a team to come together and perform, is actually us versus the cause. So like fighting against world hunger, fighting against natural disasters, and so on. So you've got a bunch of people come from all over. They're all passionate and motivated to come together for a disaster. They get to the disaster, and it's just, hey, I want to get fucking dirty, right? I want to get in there, get work done. I'm going to sweat a lot. I'm going to probably scrape my arms. I'll be in good PPE. I'll get scrapes. There'll be some blood, sweat, tears. There's emotionality. There's vulnerability. There's just all these dynamics that come together, which is incredible, right? And so you're down there, you basically spend about a week. Like I was there last week, so a week last week, and then I'll be going down again next week here. And so you spend a week with these people. You've never met most of them, like 9 out of 10 people you've never met. There were 30 people at our base or whatever, and you just get to know them. It's like a hyper focused socialization experience, right? Like you meet these people. We had 3 cabins, and so you've got, what was it, 16 people per cabin. So you get to know people like it's like a damn summer camp. It's brilliant, right? Doing meaningful work, meeting people, like not spending time on social media or reading the news or watching CNN or cussing at all the stuff that comes up in commercials. I was yelling at the TV the other day because there was commercials, but I digress. We'll stay off of that. But it's beautiful, right? You get to actually know people. Yeah, John, it's basically family, right? Like family where you're just vulnerable. You're just open and communicate with people. It's like, holy shit, right? So why do people do it? Well, you go from that and then you come back to society. And in society, you probably have a job that you go day and day, and it's similar stuff every day. You probably communicate with people, but when you communicate with them, you already sort of know them or know enough about them from a casual perspective. And so it's like, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing this weekend? This, that, and the other. It's not that deep philosophical connection. Instead, it's a regular, everyday sort of connection. All right. Gospel according to Jamie. Whoop, whoop. Nice. So you go from that back into normal society, and there's a couple of aspects, right? One is you're going back to your job, and some people love their job, some people absolutely love their job, some people are absolutely miserable at their job, and there's a lot of people in the gray area in between. But so you go from something you're super passionate about that you just flew across the country to go work on, and it was pro-social. It was okay, man. It was, yeah, reality versus utopian world. Definitely a pisser. Oh, John, I need a Sawyer class. And it drinks the holy water. Yes, sir, the Canadian whiskey. So you go back to normal society, and then it's back to the normal grind of things. You know, you probably watch too much TV, you read a little too much news, argue a little too much on the Facebooks. I'm guilty. By the way, I'm gonna I limited the visibility on a couple of posts related to the Supreme Court stuff that was going on. I'm gonna lock those down or whatever so that they're open again if people want to continue that conversation. I think it was a good conversation, and I think there's a lot of stuff to be had there. Won't get in too much to that. But so you come back to society, and it's like, well, now what, right? Like that mutualistic or shared purpose of, you know, helping out with the disaster isn't necessarily there. Now you're back to probably the individual achiever, like, or the competition between you and others, or your team and others. Like there's really this sort of change from what's known as eustress, which is, it's very stressful. Like you've got long days, you're doing hard work out there. You've got eustress though, and eustress is actually good for your body and actually weighs well on sort of your psyche. It produces good neurotransmitters, serotonin, and sort of a reward response. And so it's good stress, eustress, it's EU, whatever. And then you come back, and now you're back into normal stress. The second part, though, is that connection with like everybody, and that just candid vulnerability with everyone you come across, sort of goes back to the normal interaction that we have. And so with post-deployment blues, how do you address it, right? Like you obviously can't stay downrange all the time. You can't be out volunteering 100% of the time because volunteering doesn't pay, right? But you also need to be comfortable in your own shoes and be able to recover and get back into the swing of things. So I'd posit 2 things for post-deployment blues. I would say 1, like having short-term goals or things you can accomplish over a given week, month, whatever, and start targeting those just like you would do for anxiety or depression, right? Like focus downrange on a couple things that you can achieve, feel that achievement. If you don't make them exactly when you wanted, that's okay. Realize that sometimes we don't always make stuff happen exactly when we want. Keep at it as a goal. and write it down. Like writing stuff down actually like exponentially increases the likelihood that you'll complete those things. So the anxiety, sort of depression, right, of changing from something that you view as uber meaningful or super meaningful back to the norm of just daily work, daily life, etc. Like that's one thing to address. I would say having a goal is one way to do that. The second piece is probably something that I learned most from my daughter, and she's a terrorist, I swear to God. She wants to go to the park, right? And she's wanted to go to the park every day since I've been back, and it's been raining. And so today she's like, I think we're going to go to the park today. Are you ready? And I was like, I don't think I ever promised that, and I'm not so sure. And so I was like, maybe we'll see. And I've been tired, right? Like the thing about post-deployment blues, and a lot of, if you haven't been depressed, I think a lot of people have experienced depression, but often it sort of comes with a lethargy or like a lack of energy. And so like, it's been an interesting week, and kind of tired in the mind and tired physically. But she's like, you want to go to the park? And I'm like, not right now. And then she comes up and she'll play with her iPod right next to me. And, we were going to go to the park today. You let me know when you're ready. And it's like, you're a little 4-year-old terrorist, And so she brings up a book and she's trying to get me to read a book. And like, I just want some quiet time. But here's the funny thing. When she goes to a park, and this is something I talked about with somebody out there, like if we have very simple instructions, if you got 3 or 4 instructions on how to deal with post-deployment blues, how to deal with talking to somebody that has anxiety, depression, how to deal with depression, like if you make it simple and tactical, then it's something that can be repeated very easily, right? So Maddie, every time, basically, like we went to the park a number of months ago, she would go up to random kids at the park and sort of like ebb up to them and be standing next to them and try and like mirror them as a means to like build a friendship, right? It didn't always work. Sometimes kids were very rude. I'm not gonna lie, some kids are very rude. And then I was like, well, Maddie, you have to introduce yourself to him. Just go up and say, hi, my name's Maddie. What's yours? Soundbite. Just that simple, right? Every time we go to the park, every time a new kid comes, boom, she's right up to him. Hi, my name's Maddie. What's yours? Oh, you want to play? Off and running. They're playing tag, hide and seek. I don't know what. They make up the rules as they go. It doesn't matter. It's this beautiful interaction, but it's very simple, and it's simply predicated on that opener, right? Hey, hi, my name's Maddie. What's yours? She meets everyone at the park. Like she meets every single. She doesn't remember the names. Meets every kid at the park, right? And she interacts with them like they've been friends forever. Take that week, rebuild your body, embrace the love. Exactly, Scott. Like embrace family, but also like leave yourself open to have those conversations. It's funny. I went looking. There was a hiker that was lost. I won't put too much on the camera. There was a hiker that was lost, and I've been trying to go out and look for him over the last like a long time, since last year. And I went out probably a month ago. I'm walking the trail, and I go about 8 miles in, and I'm coming back, and there's this hiker, and he's coming in, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm doing well, And then he just starts talking to me. I spent like 2 hours standing there on the trail talking to this guy. He told me the whole history of the trail, the trails around there. He was the one that laid GPS tracks down the trail. He told me about the mining activity that used to work there, the camps that used to be built there, and gave me just this entire sight picture that I would have never got from just a, hey, how you doing? Have a great day. And continue on the way, And so just allowing yourself to be open to engage in those conversations and have meaningful conversations with people, like take that extra effort to be a little bit more vulnerable than you normally would, but also to listen and interact with people and just learn their story, right? And so I guess the second part is to be open to learning people's story and interacting a little more in a little bit more of a vulnerable fashion, or an openness that you don't usually do in everyday life. And so for post-deployment blues, I would say those two things, right? Make goals, make them reasonable, make them something that you can achieve in the next couple of weeks, And then the second part is interact with people and be open to that sort of conversation. Just let conversation go as it will. And don't be so closed off that you focus on, current events or God knows whatever you saw on CNN. Second part, Democratic Party and lessons from B.F. Skinner. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, and then we'll bring it all back. It might be sort of I don't want to say a trigger warning because it's not intended to be a trigger warning at all. It's just sort of a dialogue related to some of the themes that seem to play out in the political sphere lately. And so basically I've been reading a book. It's 12 Rules to Life. It's by Jordan Peterson. If you get an opportunity to read it, it's a decent book. It's kind of slow going because basically he's talked about everything that's in the book in one of his talks or another. So if you listen through the podcast and you're going to be like, I've already heard all this, yay lobsters, which isn't to say it's bad information. It's really good and informative information. But he said something that really caught me off guard. And so I was flying back, and one of the things he was talking about is operant conditioning. So it was either in the book or it was in his QA, whatever, one of his recent podcasts. He was talking about operant conditioning, and he said B.F. Skinner did this interesting thing. Everyone knows about operant conditioning, which is you give a reward or a punishment, and there's positive reward, which is you're giving something that's positive, or like a gift or reward. In the case of a lot of the rats that Skinner worked with, it was actually food. Negative reward is actually remove something that's bad or that's causing pain. When you get to punishment, positive punishment is delivering something that's punishing, and then of course negative punishment is actually removing something that's a positive. So you're in trouble, so I'm going to take away your ability to watch TV. Anyway, one of the things I didn't know is that in order for him to train the rats and work with the rats for conditioning, ring the bell, the food is available to mice. So Pavlov actually did the dogs and the salivation, which is the conditioning related to a stimuli. And basically what it was is he would ring the bell and then bring the food to the dogs. And when the dogs are ready to eat, they actually salivate. And one of the things that wound up happening is it would ring the bell, bring the food, dogs see food, salivate. And then they wound up taking and associating the ringing of the bell to actually delivery of food. And so the ringing of the bell caused the dogs to salivate, which sort of overrid that middle thing. Skinner would do like mazes and things like that. Very smart guy. But one of the things I didn't know is he actually starved the mice. And so the mice would be starved down to 75% of their standard body weight. And at that point, the food actually became a reward stimuli, right? And so now he's able to just give food. It's not like he's giving fucking barbecue ribs or, some fried chicken to the rats. Instead, it's hey, I'm giving you food, and you're sensing it as a reward because you're deprived of it otherwise, which is a very fascinating idea. And so it got me thinking about sort of about entitlement programs and how things play out, especially as related to taxation in modern society, I suppose, is a way to think of it. And for an example of this, like ST3, I hate ST3. Somewhere I've got a whole bunch of posts and debate related to it and how monetarily it's asinine to put $53 billion into an organization, and like it makes no sense. ST2, they boasted this year in their little flyer that they recovered 46% of their operating income from the charges to go on the thing. So like they're so non-profitable that they're actually like costing twice as much as they recover on a given year. To me, that's crazy. And now we're building a $53 billion thing, which mathematically, I just don't see how a $3 fare is ever going to pay off. That's probably why it's coming out of property taxes. Yay, yes. But so here's the interesting thing, right? Like if you increase the tax rate, if you increase the amount of money you're making, you take and you give that to basically a private organization or an organization that's for profit that's going to take and live off those profits. And you could look at Aetna after Obamacare, you could look at ST3, whatever, like they're making huge amounts of profits, okay? So you're taxing people, and then you're taking and putting it into a for-profit organization, okay? So now government is allotting money to private organization, which just I don't believe government should ever do. I'll leave that to people to decide on their own. And here's the kicker. Here's the interesting thing, right? Like, if we take the Skinner approach, then you have to deprive people of something to give something back that otherwise they wouldn't have appreciated that much. Oh, wait a minute. What about entitlement programs, or what about, sort of the fees and low fees for ST3 and et cetera? So you've just taken $53 billion from taxpayers, paid it to a for-profit organization, and then at the end of it, oh, we're charging lower fees so it'll help out those that are suffering the most. Well, sort of, but you're sort of missing the mathematics of what just happened. You just took 53 billion and you're saving people $200 a year, and all that's going to a for-profit organization. And so if you take that model, the Skinner model, then you could start to frame a lot of the legislation that's been passed, and not all of it, just a lot of legislation, and how it tends to play out. And so now it's like, holy shit, did they take something out of Skinner's book and I just haven't been paying enough attention? Like, I get the idea of going to for-profit and paying large corporations, like the cronyism, et cetera. Like, I don't think anybody really argues that exists. I think there's some dissension on whether or not that's left or right and whatever. But now all of a sudden you have a model for why that makes sense and why people buy into it or accepting of the entitlement programs, because they're like, well, I don't know how much we gave over here, but I know that it's benefiting these small amount of people, and I'm going to ignore the people that are making it rich because, oh, that's just business. Well, no, that shouldn't be what the government actually mandates. That's the whole point of the 10th Amendment, which is to say, like, don't assume power you don't need. The 10th Amendment is the federal government shouldn't do more than it needs to do. Everything else should be passed down to the lowest body of government, such that you're not like overreaching or providing stuff that doesn't apply to everyone. I'll stop ranting about the Democratic Party, BF Skinner, and sort of ST3, whatever. But that was one of the things that sort of clicked, and it was like, for me, it was a aha of, holy shit, now I understand why so many people advocate for, oh, we're helping out this small group of people. It's a mathematics problem, but also just that lack of understanding of the Skinner approach, right? Deprive of something over here to give it back, and it'll be as reward. So Jordan Peterson has a podcast, and I think I don't remember what he was talking about in the Q&A. But he started to get more left-leaning, and he basically says he's had a number of day-long conversations with Sam Harris. Sam Harris has a podcast called Waking Up with Sam Harris. I've listened to about 2 or 3 of them, and for me, it's so politically differentiated from my beliefs, and like, for being an intelligent individual, it doesn't seem that he's open to compromise or open to rationalization. And so from just a logical perspective, like I can't make that jump. I'm sort of moderate, fiscally conservative, and that guy's just like, so I can't barely see him over the horizon. So Jordan Peterson says what did he say? The right says we need hierarchy of competence, and so he says that from a legislative perspective, conservatives tend to pass legislation for that hierarchy of competence and maintaining that sort of thing, right? Like, which is this idea that, oh, we pay the big guys and then screw over the little guys. And I can't think of any examples that's the case. I'm sure there are examples where that's the case, but just from a general philosophical standpoint, my view of conservatism, or maybe it's a federalist viewpoint, is that the key premise is law and legislation is good for everyone, or it's just not good law. And secondarily, like, pass less laws that apply the most, instead of passing all these laws that can be misconstrued, misinterpreted, realigned, or adopted by some cause that you don't want, right? Like, power actually makes you vulnerable, especially when you're going down that route. And so from that standpoint, I feel like the main conservative tenet is like, pass laws that are good for everyone, or they're just not good, right? And the Republican Party, you can view this over the last 150 years realistically. And if we really want to have the great switch, we can go back to the Strom Thurmond and all that crap. But the way I view it, that's been a core tenet of the Republican Party over the last I guess 170 years, however long you want to look. Getting off of politics and going right into religion, which is another one that people absolutely love talking about, I have to tell you. So was thinking a little bit about religion, and there's been a number of posts that are, related to, oh, you can believe in God, but you can't believe some, meant not to get political. You can't believe the testimony of one witness in front of a Senate judiciary committee, even though there were, 4 accounts that didn't corroborate that evidence, but you can believe in a 2,000-year-old book. Here's the thing. So not to take away from religion, just to look at the Bible as a document, right? As a book or a series of books. It's a historical record from 200 years ago. A lot of the stuff back then, a lot of the traditions and the information was actually passed down through either narrative story or through song, right? Like that's where folk songs come from. They were trying to impart some sort of knowledge or wisdom that could then easily be carried down from generation to generation. It's much easier to teach a kid a song than it is to say, hey, the London Bridge fell down because they didn't build it very fucking well, and here's all this stuff, right? Instead, you say, London Bridge is falling down, blah, blah, blah. And if they ever think to understand what's going on, they're like, oh, there's actually a story behind this, and it makes a lot of sense. Like Ring Around the Rosie, Pocket Full of Posies was that the play? It's about some old historical event that took place. And so by creating it into a song, they're able to share that much easier, right? So if you just look at the values behind the Bible, you start getting sort of the 10 Commandments and, whether or not he actually went up, there's a stone tablet, I don't know. But it makes it very memorable that, hey, there's 10 Commandments, and the first one is thou shalt not kill, right? Okay, cool. We have a bit of information. Don't covet the neighbor's wife or whatever. I don't remember them all, which is fair. But basically, like whatever the morals and the standards were of the day, they took and codified that into a narrative form, and that narrative form then got written into the Bible, and the Bible has been passed down for Black Plague. There we go. Has been passed down for at least 2,000 years, probably a lot longer. In fact, it was probably basically, when you rewind thousands of years back into history, the ability to read and write was actually very scarce. The ability to recreate a book was very limited because you had a scribe. A scribe had to literally write everything by hand. Like the printing press didn't come out until I think the 1800s or 1830s or something crazy like that. And so way back in the day, it was like people would learn the narratives or the stories, and then they would be sort of orators to share what was going on. Like they would be the town scribe, basically, that would communicate the story to everyone else, whether that's, about somebody that's the new criminal, about something that's going on with law. Like the Assassin's Creed games do a great job of sort of showing that. I realize it's a game, but it's based on history and how that played out. But so since literacy was so low, they would take stories, and that would be their way to convey stuff over time, right? A story has more object permanence than just like, here's this fact and this thing that happened, right? Your memory only lasts so long as you can recollect it. Yeah, Scott, don't be a dick. That's great. Yeah, so basically you have like all these accounts and narratives that then were distilled into a Bible. They became sort of this transcript or this long form written testimony of what the values and the beliefs are, and sort of some story behind it to make it more anchored or more salient for people to understand and remember, right? And so if you look at Western civilization, we actually took the Bible or a lot of the key tenets of the Bible, formulated that into the laws of the land, like murder is illegal and theft is illegal, and adultery in some circuits is like highly frowned upon, if not illegal. Like military actually like makes it a big boo-boo where you can lose rank or whatever. So you have the Bible. It was translated into law and sort of distilled down into law, and then over just from a cultural perspective over the last 100 years, you can look at the 1890s when Nietzsche said God is dead, and basically what he was saying wasn't that like God died and there is no God. It was more of like, hey, this dialect related to the value systems that we predicated upon Christianity is starting to starting to die out, and people are starting to vary their values and beliefs, which is also related to just like a more stable society, less likelihood that you'll be killed, murdered, robbed, etc. So like basically you're reaping the benefits of this historical text that brought down morals and narrative. Now you're living in it. You're like, hey, you know what? Since we have these laws, we don't need that historical text anymore. And now we're starting to, I don't want to use the word pervert, but we're starting to create a lot more laws that you wouldn't have distilled out from that thing. And so basically like we took this knowledge from thousands of years, we distilled it down and codified it into law. And now from the laws, we're saying, well, we don't need that old thing. We're going to take and build what the hell we want and go for it as a civilization. But we sort of, by moving away from that 2,000-year-old narrative or thousands of years old narrative, and now sort of just winging it, we're probably setting ourselves up for not fun times, I guess, is a way to think about it. And that's not trying to be like, I guess it is a little bit cynical, but it's not trying to be like, hey, doomsday, the world's going to come to an end. It just means, hey, there's probably going to be a reckoning that has to take place where we have to reconcile between like, hey, we had this value system that was codified by Christianity over thousands of years. Now we're at the spot where we have law, and it's starting to drift in many different directions because we stopped believing or deciding that made a lot of sense, and we should figure out how to distill that. Instead, we're just sort of flying by the wire and creating what we want as law. And so I guess the point of that is like, when you look at it, there was all these stories and all these narratives over thousands of years. And you could argue that the Bible actually has influence from other cultures and stuff as Christianity went along and as like the spread of religion took place. And that might go all the way up to the Renaissance era, right? Like related to holidays, etc. A lot of them come from different cultures. And it was a way to sort of incorporate those and make them feel more at home and aligned to a Christian model of thinking. Yeah, gun control laws. What is it? I-1639. If you don't vote no on that, then you're crazy, or you just didn't read it, because it basically turns every gun into an assault rifle. Everything that's semi-automatic, which is like 90% of the guns produced today, including pistols that you holster carry and carry concealed. They have, fast firing, rapid firing magazines that don't require a distinct pull of a locking mechanism. And it's so stupid. Like literally in 1639, I think it's 1639, I-1639, if you go towards the end of it and you read the description of an assault rifle, it literally takes the definition for a semi-automatic firearm and then transposes it there and changes the wording to assault rifle. And it's like, that's so frustrating. Highly recommend vote no on that. If we take anything from the last 2 weeks, though, we'll find that a lot of people just vote on partisan lines, which is absolutely fucking absurd, right? If you have 49 people vote against somebody because of a he said, she said thing that was uncorroborated by any of the witnesses listed, no facts, no history of that sort of behavior, and then say, oh, well, I'm going to vote against it because raw, I'm highly skeptical. Yeah, a lot of the Ruger 1022s, like, my kids have shot that thing. It has no recoil. It's not like... Yeah, that law frustrates me to no end. So religion codified into Bible thousands of years ago, codified into law over the last couple hundred years, especially as relates to the United States. And now all of a sudden we're like, oh, because we're so stable, we can, one, remove all signs of religion from our law, which is just patently false because it's the moral system that we live by. But two, it means that people are more likely to sort of create chaos or string theory out of that. And then the possibilities for randomization or fragmentation are sort of endless. Like it's really a frightening thing, and it's really taken us into chaos. And realistically, how do you stop it? Well, you got to make sure that people are logical enough to actually discourse on stuff and political discourse or discourse overall has been severely impeded over the last, especially the last decade, but it's probably been the last 50 or 100 years if I'm realistic with myself and of course you guys because you're here. Yeah, Scott, don't even worry about it. I go on tangents all the time, my friend. So yeah, it was just sort of the idea of a copy starts to lose that fidelity that you wind up getting from sort of an original document. So even though the Bible wasn't the original stories, it was codified down and somewhat immutable, like it maintained its form over a couple thousand years, despite the numerous translations of it, the King James, etc. It was relatively unchanged though, like the premises were the same, and now all of a sudden we've got it codified into law. And we're moving away from that. So now we lose sort of that commonality of a moral structure, and the fallout is yet to be seen. So I think that's the 4 topics I had tonight, which is post-deployment blues, what they are, why they probably happen, what can plausibly be done about it. And I'm not saying that's the only thing that can be done. It's just sort of my sort of philosophical or take on it that I've been trying to ride by this week. Democratic Party, but really just lessons from B.F. Skinner and how deprivation winds up coming back as a reward response if you sufficiently do that over an elongated period of time, and which also makes it harder to spot what's going on behind the scenes. Whether or not conservatism aligns with the need for a hierarchy of competence, which I don't believe it does. I believe that the core premise is like even footing and even opportunity for everyone. And if it's not for everyone, then it's the wrong thing to pass, the wrong thing to institute. In fact, the tax reforms last year, like everyone's within like 3 or 4 percentage points. And that's across the board, which is beautiful. And it seems to be working for our economy with 4.3% GDP growth over the last year. And then religion codified as values and sort of how that plays out or how I think it's important, and we're kind of missing the point. So I don't know the fix. I can't recommend the fix. Like when it comes down to it, I'm an atheist. It used to be agnosticism, and then someone smarter than me looked at me and said, well, that basically means you are atheist, and I didn't have an argument. So that's one of the things I was corrected on. I learned, and I don't have a better argument for that. But I still think that the values and the morals that are passed down from the Bible have a lot to offer to society, and I think I've articulated that before, related to how I think it ought to be something that we teach in schools, again, just because it sort of is that baseline for morality or for common understanding. It's basically like do no trespass, which is a very positive and powerful thing to focus on. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't think I had anything else. I don't think I had anything else written down. So thank you so much for listening in and for the dialogue. Chat was actually pretty active today, which is great. And see you next time. Let's ready, set, and engage.